So the problem is you have to be talking to do that.
Oh, are you trying to do the like we're just like we start mid conversation?
Yeah, I was trying to do it like Mark Maron.
Okay. I don't watch enough Mark Maron to know how he does it.
Oh, he just like sometimes it's just going, it's just starting. But then I realized like midway through the count, I was like, well, we would have to be talking.
Okay. You know what? I'm gonna let you have full creative license on this, and when you send me the file, just cut it in wherever you want.
Yeah, I think we should go from here. I think this is a good point to go from.
Okay, I
All
think this is
right.
perfect. It's
So,
your eye.
hey, okay, I appreciate it. So, Nick, you just watched The Favorite. You're looking at its 4.0 letterbox rating. You're wondering, is this underrated, overrated, or rated properly? That is the question that hopefully we're able to answer today. We have a couple things. We're going to go over some of the background initial thoughts, summarizing some of the stats from Letterboxd. As we do, we're going to talk about production. We're going to talk about some of the best, the worst, maybe ask each other a couple questions, and then we'll have a couple closing thoughts at the end, which hopefully answers our thesis statement at the top. But first, before we get into all that, Nick, what have you been watching recently?
Ooh, what have I been watching recently? So, I actually just went to the theater the other day and saw Companion, which I really liked. And a quick little administrative note here: if you do want to jump forward, we have chapters in the bottom to the favorite discussion. But I saw Companion with Sophie Turner, I believe is her name, as well as
Well,
Jack Quaid. Oh,
she's from
it's
Game
Sophie
of Thrones,
Thatcher.
right? Oh, okay.
Sophie Thatcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally mixed that up. And
Yeah.
Jack Quaid. But do you know anything about this movie?
No, I know nothing about it. Tell me about it.
It is, well, honestly, do you mind if I go a little spoilery?
Oh, I don't care. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm only going to say what's in the trailer, which does include a spoiler. But basically, the idea is it's like three couples are on like a weekend trip to this house in the middle of nowhere, like a mansion. And it's revealed very early on that Sophie Thatcher is a robot. And she's basically like a companion bot to Jack Quaid. And I actually really, I don't know, it kind of looked like one of those like January, February releases that was just going to be immediately forgotten. And maybe it will be by most people. I actually really enjoyed it. I kind of thought like, they give away a big like spoiler in the trailer. I was like, that's kind of a desperation move normally, right? But I thought it was actually really funny and just like a really like, I don't know, very believable in a sweet way. Small cast, kind of a small story, but I think that they do a really excellent job with it.
Yeah, it's crazy when they give that away in the trailer. I do not understand that. I just like have stopped watching trailers. Do you watch any trailers anymore?
If it's a movie, it's funny. It's funny you asked that. If it's a movie I know I'm gonna watch, I'll like close my eyes during the trailer when I'm in the theater.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
I know I'm gonna see Mickey 17 next week. I'm going
Right.
opening night. I'm immediately gonna close my eye. Or actually, no, it's this Thursday. I don't watch the trailers at this point because I just know I'm gonna see it.
And I saw one for that, and oh no, maybe I shouldn't say anything about it because you don't want to hear anything about it.
Oh
but,
no, I've seen like little glimpses.
Well, I saw one, and it didn't make me want to go see it. I think I would have wanted to go see it more if I didn't know about it for some reason. I don't know why that is, but that's how I feel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I highly recommend. I mean, Bong Joon-ho is obviously like incredible. So I think I'm pretty fired up about it. But I like, I don't know. Do you go to many movies in theater? I feel like you see a lot of classics at home.
Yeah, I don't go so many in theaters. I think I did a decent amount last year. Like that was probably the most I have in a long time was last year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I would go see some new things. There hasn't been anything that sparked my interest enough so far. Wait, we didn't talk about the Oscars. Did you watch the Oscars last night?
I did. Just honestly, I would totally recommend you and Jazz to see Companion. I think it's
Okay.
a fun date night movie. I really, really would recommend it. I'd love to hear what you think.
All right, I'll throw it on the list.
Yeah, I watched the Oscars all the way through. Did you?
I watched like the second half of it. Yeah.
Okay. I really enjoyed it. I'm a huge Conan fan. I never really watched his show a whole ton, but like everything he does is my exact sensibility. So I thought he was just super funny, a great host. I mean, you can like immediately tell that he was a writer for The Simpsons with how kind of like vaudeville and slapstick a lot of the references are. But I enjoyed it. Were there any picks that you were upset by or you didn't agree with?
No, I did. I think I did pretty good. I made some picks before, and I just want to see like where I'd land. And I was doing pretty good until the last two. I did not get. I thought it was gonna be Demi Moore for sure, and I thought The Brutalist was gonna pull it out for Best Picture.
Yep.
But up until then, I was doing pretty good. So yeah, I liked watching it. It was fun. I didn't listen to it much. Like, we're kind of talking and doing other stuff, but so I kind of missed the like Conan parts. But I watched like the awards being given. You know.
Yeah, I was not expecting the Honora sweep of 4 out of 5, but I guess in retrospect, it was like such a front runner when it came out, and then Amelia Perez came out, and A Complete Unknown, and a number of other movies, The Brutalist, all came out at the end of the year. So it felt like it just got a little buried. But I was happy to see. I felt like a lot of the movies that I loved at least got some win. So like Conclave won for best, I believe it was adapted screenplay. A Real Pain getting best supporting actor. Like I'm even if Zuckerberg I almost said Zuckerberg.
Eisenberg.
Mark Eisenberg.
Jesse Eisenberg. Yeah.
I almost called him by both ends of the fucking name.
It makes sense. We did the episode too.
Hey, he's a great actor. Yeah,
he's a great actor.
Crushed the role.
Great writer.
Jesse Eisenberg. I really would have liked to see him win something else as well, but I feel like if you can even write a character and direct a film where any character gets an Oscar for it, like that looks favorably upon you.
Yeah, fair enough. I put you on the spot there, but yeah, I just want to hear what you thought about it. I enjoyed it though overall, and I liked Honora, so I had no problem with it. I just thought it was gonna be The Brutalist. I think I liked The Brutalist better, but it was cool. Yeah,
I wish that he won for directing.
Yeah, at least
I think just how far they stretched that budget. I think that would have been a good win for our guy. But it is what it is. Yeah.
What are you about to say?
Oh, I was going to ask, have you watched anything recently?
Oh yeah. Only Leprechaun Origins and Leprechaun Returns.
Every episode, there's like 4 more Leprechaun movies that you've seen. You have to be at the end of the bucket, right?
No, this is it. These are the final 2.
Okay.
The final 2 chapters. So you ready to hear about them? So Leprechaun Origins, 2014 release. Truly horrible. It's actually the first one in the series to not have the great Warwick Davis star in it. And actually the Leprechaun
that's not true, is it?
Yeah, it is. Warwick was in the first 6 of them. Isn't that awesome?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then the 7th one, he steps away. They take it in like a horror, like cabin in the woods kind of direction. And they make the Leprechaun, like he's not even really a Leprechaun. He's like this weird, like zombie ape kind of guy. And yeah, it was not good. But then Leprechaun Returns, 2018, incredible conclusion to the franchise. My only problem with it is that it doesn't have Warwick. If Warwick had come back and done this one as the final one in the franchise, I think this would be an all-time classic, all-time horror classic. There's actually one line I want to tell you. Then I promise, folks, we'll get into the movie. But he throws a pair, the leprechauns he's in the guy's bedroom, and he's looking around at stuff. And the leprechauns, he's doing all kinds of modern stuff in this movie. Like at one point, he's riding on a drone. He's flying around trying to kill them. I'm serious, trying to kill them on a drone. But then he's in the guy's bedroom and he finds a pair of Crocs, and then he throws them and they go into the trash. He throws them in the trash. He's like, "Oh, I'll be doing fashion a favor by killing this one." And I'm like, "Oh!" He just cooks. He's just cooking brands, and they cooked David Blaine at one point. I was like, "Wow, this is really up to date."
Yeah, when did this come out that they're doing David Blaine burns?
2018. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think David Blaine was not relevant even in 2010. So
no,
little old.
But yeah, it was good, better than expected. I just think it's the second best one in the franchise, and I think we got to do an episode where I make you watch the first and then this one, and then this Leprechaun movie, and see what you think about the Leprechaun franchise. Because this one really is a sequel. The first one is one with Jennifer Aniston, and then this one is really the sequel to that one. Even though there's
so funny that Jennifer Aniston is in this.
I know, she's a star. Even though there's 6 in between it. No.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely get that in the books. We'll just have to wait till season 2 of No One Can Hear You Pod, which is definitely on the way.
Yeah.
Anything else you watched?
No, that's it. Let's get into the movie. Are you ready to get into the movie?
I'm ready.
All right. So first off, I want to say it's a great recommendation, and I want to thank one of our dedicated fans for recommending this.
That's a great point. We do need to really flag that this is the first time this is a recommended viewing.
And this
is our first rec.
Yes, and this is a message to all the fans. If you recommend a movie, we will do it.
100% of the time. So far, 100% of the time that there's been a movie rec that's been commented, we have watched it.
We have a 100% rate of doing movies submitted by fans. You heard it here.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate it. It's probably not something I would have watched on my own, which is awesome
Hmm.
about it too. It's like it's not something I would have just picked on, streaming or whatever. And I think it helped me understand Yorgos a lot more because like a lot of people like him. I had seen Poor Things. I didn't really totally get him, or I was trying to figure it out. And this one definitely helped me out a little bit. What were your kind of initial thoughts when watching it? What were your initial reactions?
I was very interested to watch it. Similarly to you, I this probably wouldn't have been one I would have gotten around to watching anytime soon. Not because of anything against it. It just wasn't first on my list, and there's honestly so many classics I haven't gotten to.
Oh yeah,
But I had some trepidation going into it because in the past I've had a bit of a Yorgos allergy, where it's just there's certain directors, artists that I think for whatever reason, like I can recognize his skill and like how everyone seems to love him, and I can totally see like so many valid reasons why. It just hasn't always been my style in the past.
mm-hmm.
So I was anxious to see how I'd feel about it. Like, so for instance, I wanted to ask you before we get into this, what other Yorgos movies have you seen, and what did you think of them in general or specifically?
Well, the only other one I've seen is Poor Things, and I didn't love that.
Oh, okay.
So, but like so many people talk about him, so I've been wanting to check another one out. So like I felt like this was a step in a good direction for me, like understanding him more. He's like, oh, this is a guy who's a fan of like some classic cinema, like Barry Lyndon, and like he's really
Hmm.
interested in trying these different lenses, and like it made like that kind of that fisheye that he did in Poor Things. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a thing that he likes to do, and Poor Things
Totally.
was like a crazy
Yeah.
version of it, But like, I guess it kind of like helped me understand him a bit better, and that made I guess maybe appreciate him a little more.
It's funny. In some ways, I think you can see like certain artists where like I think sometimes people like they'll claim like, oh, I like the first album or the first couple movies of a certain artist
Right.
more than their later work, and I think that's in part because there's an incentive for artists early on to not necessarily that it's mainstream in the way that it's like pop, but they are trying to make something that's not as niche in what they're doing because they need it to be successful, right? Like they haven't had a chance to have mainstream success yet, and so it's not
Yep.
until their sophomore or later piece of art that they're willing to go a little bonkier,
Yep.
and so in some ways it's funny watching this. Like there were aspects I think I liked more about it because he hadn't gone full Yorgos yet.
Sure.
But then at the same time, and by that I mean like the very stilted language. Poor Things has some really crazy shots with the fisheye lens, like you just mentioned. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, I mean, and I should say, I've only seen The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Poor Things, and Kinds of Kindness, which came out last year, and then now this movie. But A Killing of a Sacred Deer, or The Killing of a Sacred Deer, came out before this and had plenty of weird shit going on in it in terms of particularly the script.
Mm.
So I don't know. I mean, Yorgos has definitely been around for a while, and he was already well established by then. But I did enjoy this. Okay, all that said of like the baggage
Yeah.
going into this, what were your initial thoughts going into it?
Well, I mean, I liked it. Like I actually I was actually excited at first when it started because like that first shot, like it's just pretty much straight up Barry Lyndon when they're in this carriage, and there's a very famous shot in Barry Lyndon. I was like, oh, okay, he's a
Mm-hmm.
fan, and he's gonna like this is gonna be very artistic and like I think it's like 18th century or whatever. It's like okay, I know what I'm getting into here. We're gonna get like some like painting esque stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff I really liked. Like there's a couple of good laughs. I liked when she got like one of the first things I really liked was when she got caught in the room, and it's like, okay, there's more to this story. Like there's something more going on in the relationship, and Emma Stone is caught up above. But I was really enjoying it. What about you? When it first started going, how are you feeling?
Yeah, like I said, I had some nervousness about it, but I think even the fact that it has rather straightforward dialogue, I liked a lot. Like
Mm,
at first, I was thought it might have been another instance of the stilted dialogue that Yorgos likes to use because we get to see the Queen Anne with her attendant Sarah, and just the way they talk to each other is really like high and courty and all that stuff. But then you kind of start to see like, oh, that's also just because of their position and like the lives that they lived and whatnot. But no, I mean, I love Emma Stone a ton, so that gave me a lot of confidence in it. I think the first couple scenes of her in the carriage, like immediately. I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, it's so disgusting in there, and you're seeing this guy immediately. The first thing you see is this guy reaching into his pants, and then it cuts away, and you're like, what was going on with that? And then later on, she does explain that there's some perv in the wagon. But
Yeah.
there's something funny about the way that, like, I think 9 out of 10 movies would show that as like a bit of a traumatizing moment, which is like understandable in a way. But Yorgos is kind of, he finds like a silliness in the perverseness of people. It's like,
Yeah.
you should be ridiculed and mocked for it, but we don't have to be afraid of it, which I think is an interesting pivot on that sort of stuff. Like, it's very different from like Fincher's take and a lot of other directors.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, the point being also is like when it started, I was like, okay, this is worth watching. And I think maybe we take some time to go through some of the great stuff and the what we thought is not so great, because I do want to go through that as a list. But let me back up first 1 second and just give you the summary and give you the stats, and then we can just go through what's the good, what's the bad. So
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's fun to be queen sometimes. England, early 18th century. The close relationship between Queen Anne and Sarah Churchill is threatened by the arrival of Sarah's cousin Abigail Hill, resulting in a bitter rivalry between the two cousins to be the Queen's favorite. It had a $15 million budget and $96 million worldwide box office, which is great. Viewed by 1.1 million people with an impressive 4.0 average on Letterboxd. And I think the question I want to tackle with you today is, on Letterboxd, is this underrated, overrated, or properly rated with that 4.0? But I think we're gonna get back to it. Let's talk about the best, let's talk about the worst, and let's kind of have like a wrap up discussion. Where are we at? Overrated, underrated, properly rated. I wanted to give you a couple of things on the production. Just some interesting things when I was reading back on it. So they did principal photography in this place called Hatfield House in Hertfordshire at the Hampton Court Palace. And this was in like March to May 2017. One interesting thing that I found, it's readily available. It's not like I was digging deep for this one, but this was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, which is like the same that Roma got that year. This is not a big year for me in movies. Like, I was not watching a lot of movies. Green Book won Best Picture. What about you? 2017, 18, were you watching a lot of stuff? I think I missed this whole year.
Yeah, no, I definitely was like you. I was still in college at that point, so I was really not thinking about film as much at the time. Like, it just wasn't something I cared as much about, which is kind of funny. I think high school, I loved film enough that I considered going to film school, and then post grad, I've just dove in completely back into it. But no, I was not really aware of this when it came out.
Yeah, no, me either. The other interesting thing that I found was, so Deborah Davis, she wrote this screenplay. She had like no experience and very little like knowledge of Queen Anne. So this is based off like a real person. So it's a real like triangle with Queen Anne, Sarah, and I guess most of the research she got was from or I guess one of the best sources that got the most, like, or some of the best research was from Winston Churchill. Did you see that?
Oh no, I didn't see that.
I mean, I guess he has some relation to Sarah Churchill, or
yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. But he wrote like a biography, and he talked, and he had like a 4-part biography, and he talks about kind of the little love triangle there. But yeah, but I mean, but at the end of it, it's like or in the real meat of it, it's all made up, like, or speculative or fictional. It's not like a real kind of like story between them. So yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. Let's go through it a bit. Let's talk about the best. Talk about the worst. Like, I wanted to give you. I'll give you maybe. Actually, no. You go first. Give me some of your best. What were some of your favorite things that you liked about it?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of the movie actually is the script. There's a lot of great quotes throughout the movie that I really, really enjoyed, and like found myself struck in the moment with them. I can't for the life of me think of one right now, but I will pull one up in a second. Another thing that I really did enjoy was the scenery, though. Like, I think it's easy to overlook the costuming and really just like how every square inch of the walls in this palace that the queen lives in is like immaculate and like contains some bit of artistry or craftsmanship. So I think all those things together, it's a beautiful movie to look at.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's like one of the things I was talking about earlier with like it kind of being like Barry Lyndon, and it's like this. It's just that he does a really good job with that, and that's always a fun kind of movie to watch too. Yeah, and then I was talking about this earlier. I got into it earlier about like some of the first scenes that you find out there's kind of more to the story, and I just kind of like that the way they play the games in this era. You know, like with Nick Cole approaching her. He knows that she has like a bigger secret that he can get to, and then she goes back to the like back to Sarah and like tells her that she knows basically, and then she fakes shoot. Like it's so dramatic, and all like the plotting against each other. I really like that too.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I think Nicholas Hoult, I should say, is also one of my highlights of the entire movie. His costume in particular is incredible. Like that wig goes a full foot off of his head on top. This is my favorite Nicholas Hoult part.
Really? Not Juror number 2?
God, no, I think that movie is terrible. No,
I know, that's why.
I think he's incredible in this movie, though. Seriously, I really enjoy him. I kind of wish I got to see more of this side of him, because he kind of like lately has been shoehorned into just being the ultimate cuck. Like,
oh yeah,
Nosferatu, he's a kind of a cuck. He's literally a cuck. Juror number 2, he's got cuck energy the whole time. Like, I like seeing this like very theatrical stage version of Nicholas Hoult. I've never seen this before.
Oh yeah, no, it's good. What about just the other performances? Like Joe Alwyn, I guess, is a big like guy that people like. I wasn't aware of him until I think it was when I saw him in The Brutalist. I had never seen him before, but I know that's like a lot of people like him. What'd you think about him?
I don't know. I thought he was great. I think his standout scene to me was the dance sequence with he and Lady Sarah, which was like definitely like another point in the movie where I was like, okay, like how Yorgos Lanthimos is this movie going to end up being? And actually, even in the moment, I was like, you know what? I do appreciate this is like, it's just supposed to be funny and fantastical. And like, maybe it's just not my style of fantasy. Because ultimately, I mean, like, it's not Lord of the Rings, but it is fantasy. Like the way that like everyone's standing there while they not only do a silly dance, like it's not like this is like a director trying to say like, hey, like, this is what like power is doing something extremely absurd and no one says anything about it. It goes past that because they're actually incredible dancers for that scene. And so maybe it's not entirely my style, but I did appreciate it. So anyway, I really enjoyed him throughout the movie. I thought he was great, like his chemistry with Emma Stone. Although I really should say, and if you want to jump in with anything else you might have to say about his acting, feel free. But I do feel remiss in that I started with complimenting Nicholas Hoult when really like the core trio of this movie is who we should be talking about.
That was my next question is what about the 3 lead women? You know, we got Nicole and Joel and pretty good, but like, what do you think about the dynamic between the 3? I mean, that's the real thing.
They're great. I think like the performances speak for themselves. Those are all great. I think what's more interesting to talk about, to me at least, is they do such a great job, or Yorgos does, of throughout this movie, there's moments where I felt myself feeling like, oh, okay, this is supposed to be the good guy of the story. And then at other points, either earlier or later, I'm like, no, this is the villain for sure. Like, this is who the antagonist is. Like, Emma Stone obviously starts off impoverished. She's on the bottom. And then very quickly, she's fighting for a real spot of power. And you're like, okay, like that makes sense. And like somewhere along the way, she's lying to get it. But you're like, well, there's some justifications there. And then once she gets it, obviously, she's very dirty and kind of only gets uglier and uglier with her actions. Right. And I don't know.
So who is the bad guy? Who is the bad guy? Like, that's why I left thinking. I was like, who am I supposed to side with? Like who won? Who's the bad guy? I don't even know. It's hard.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, so I had this for later, but I think we might as well talk about it now. I mean, I think if you're supposed to, you know, by the end of the movie, that's when we have the most information we can. It seems like Emma Stone is really doing the most evil stuff in a sense. I mean, the ending scene is Colman is, you know, kind of abusing Emma Stone in a sense, or at least just showing like a display of power over her. But I don't know, outside of that scene, Emma Stone still got everything she wanted, or at least she thought she did. I think Emma's doing really more of the evil stuff by the end than Colman is. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there is like a clear winner. Like, I think when wait, is Colman Sarah? Is that the person who plays Sarah?
No, that's Queen Anne.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about Olivia Colman.
Oh, Olivia Colman. Okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with my girlfriend was saying that she played the Queen or something, right?
Yes.
Okay, no, so like between like, well, I feel like she's kind of not even part of it. Like, she's the real one in power, but the power struggle is between like Sarah and
Abigail.
and Abigail, you know, and between those two, I don't really know, because like when Sarah leaves, she does say like, "Oh, you thought you won," like, so I'm like, oh, does she know it's just gonna get like worse from here? And then like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm also like, did she actually steal all those gold, like all the gold from them, or was that like just Abigail, or you know? And then it's like, oh, is their relationship actually the core of it? Like when she's writing the letter to her, you know, like is that really what we're supposed to focus in on? It was interesting, like all like just interesting questions, but I wasn't quite sure, like, yeah, where I landed on any of them.
Yeah, I think to go back to what you brought up of Sarah saying, you know, you think you've won.
Yeah,
I think that's an interesting point in the movie where, like, at the time, it's a little unclear what she meant by that. Like, maybe
yeah,
she thinks literally, like, oh, I'm going to come back and beat you. But I think by the end, like, that final scene is where we really find out what she means, which is like, it's not so much that Sarah was replaced by Abigail, Emma Stone's character, 1-to-1.
right,
It's more so that the queen replaced an actual confidant with a pet. And
right,
so I think what Sarah's getting at when she says, like, you think you've won, is that it's like she thinks Emma Stone believes herself to now have taken Sarah's place, and she hasn't earned the respect that Sarah had. And so even if she's getting some of the benefits of the role, ultimately the queen never would have forced Sarah to, like, on her knees rub her legs in that demeaning way.
right.
Like, she might have struck her, but it was ultimately out of love and care and concern, and that just doesn't exist in the relationship between Emma Stone and Olivia Colman's character.
Oh, I think you got it. I think that's exactly what it is. Wow. Yeah, that's probably it. And then she doesn't realize that Emma Stone is really not who she says she is, and that Sarah was actually telling the truth until she sees her like step on her rabbit. She's like, "Oh, you didn't actually like really care about the
Mm-hmm.
little rabbits or like the kids or whatever." Yeah, wow, yeah, that's probably it. And but Emma Stone was
Okay.
like, "Okay, go ahead."
Oh, no, you go. Yo, sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, so I had a question for you, though,
Sure, sure.
because so I said it a second ago, so I wanted to say this later, but I think this is the time to say it now. So back to the point of, like, do you agree that you see both every character, all three of these characters, as both the protagonist and the antagonist at some point?
The only one, I don't think the Queen's really in the mix though, because I feel like she's kind of just like calling the shots, and the other two are vying for her.
Okay, well, maybe you could say that at least there's certainly scenes where you see quite a bit of ugliness in her
Sure.
actions.
Wait, so ask the question again. Let me think about it again then.
So my point is just that I think, unlike a lot of movies, like where there's really a clear protagonist, and even if they're like an anti-hero with some bad things, like you really
Yeah.
do see the movie from their point of view, and there's a clear opposition to that person.
Yeah.
I feel like all three of the leads have moments where you can see, like, oh, this person actually is a victim of their circumstance in a way. And then at a separate point in the movie, you'll see, no, this person abuses their power, and even if they are a victim of their own circumstance, they are clearly, you know, people that are abusing others.
Yeah, I think with Emma Stone, you didn't see it until the end. Like you were kind of rooting for her the
Yes.
whole time, and then at the end, it's like, oh, when you see her at that dinner table party, and like she has all the makeup on and stuff, you're like, oh, she's just like them too. Dang, you
Well,
know?
she's retching, and also even when she's already won, she's framing the Churchills for a crime that it seems like they didn't commit, right? Of
Right.
embezzling all this money. But so I'm belaboring it a bit, but the question that I have for you is, I think you could make the argument, or at least like the most obvious, who is the real big bad by the end of the movie is Emma Stone, because first of all, she's the last person shown to be doing evil things. But I think more
Yeah.
importantly, the things that she's doing that are bad, quote unquote, are like actually things that could kind of destroy the society that she lives within, which is like, if Lady Sarah is like cruel to people, and maybe she's even wrong with the choices she makes, she does seem to actually be doing it for the good of England to some extent, right? And maybe the queen can be cruel and childish and like overly emotional, and maybe she's cruel to the people that she works with, but like it doesn't seem like her maliciousness goes too much further than that. Emma Stone's actions of getting the leader of their military forces to be framed for embezzlement after he's been a war hero on behalf of Britain could have like actual ramifications to the country of, first of all, they've lost their guy that knows how to lead them. But second off, there's like a greater ramification of all the other men and leaders in this country now are aware of like, hey, you could be literally the hero of this country, and we could exile you just because some queen who's sickly and knows nothing, as far as they know, said so. And so I think what Emma Stone's doing could be the most evil. But the question for you is, do you think it's kind of fine for her to do that when she exists within a society that the opening of this movie is when she was 15 years old, she was essentially a sex slave, like immediately. And then her only recourse was to be a prostitute. So maybe she owes this society nothing. And if she sees fit to do activities that could burn it down, she shouldn't have to feel remorse, because clearly the society didn't care for her in the first place either.
Yeah, and I mean, you're making me think about a bunch of things. Was she though supporting like them going to war more? I thought Sarah was. So Sarah was more bad in that regard, not Emma Stone, right?
Yeah, well, I guess at that point, the way in which I'm framing the question is assuming that you want the betterment of England because you are an English person in this movie. So, I mean, you could totally make the argument of if you just want peace in general, then like, continuing to go to war is wrong. My argument is more so assuming that you want the betterment of England. And, at the end they say like, yeah, we have like a truce with France, but we got worse than we should have gotten. So it seems like they were too early to pull out, if we're to believe these characters.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm thinking about is a good question. Is like, is it more just about like the internal struggle between people who want power, and like ultimately the queen has the power at the end. The last shot is her, just completely demoralizing Emma Stone. So it's like there's a greater thing going on, definitely. But what about just the triangle of the struggle between the three of them, and who is the big bad in that regard? I think it's the queen, because at the end of the day, the other two are just like sucking up to her. And that didn't answer your question, but that's kind of how, like, that's the only way I can think about it, I guess, when I'm trying to think of an answer,
No, I think those are two separate questions.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's a great point. I think that's probably the more core question that the movie's asking, of like, which of these three ultimately has the power. And I think and is probably the most evil, and it kind of is the queen in that sense, because she, even if she just was born into it, she's still using that power every day. But I am curious, do you think that Emma Stone's actions, if they jeopardize the country, are still valid because she shouldn't have to feel loyal to this country in the first place?
No,
would you agree to that?
No, I wouldn't agree to that. And also, I don't know if her, I think what I got caught up on is, I don't know if I think she was the one who was helping them stop fighting. So I was thinking about it through that regard. But I guess just her like kind of taking over or whatever, that's also, I mean, or is it bad? I don't know. So that's where I get like, that's what I think I got caught up on. But also to your question, no, I don't think just because of that she can like take over and like she doesn't know anybody, anything. I think you still do have a common decency as a person that you should follow. What about you? What do you think?
I ultimately, well, I don't know. Actually, maybe I disagree. I mean, I think that there's truth to both sides.
Okay.
But I do think, I mean, going back to like, what do we know about her? She comes from a relatively upstanding family, so she's educated. She's forced into being a sex slave, essentially getting married off when she's 15 to a complete stranger who she says, I mean, one of my favorite quotes in the movie, but I think it's telling to who this person is when Masham, Emma Stone's eventual husband, comes into her room, and she says, "Have you come to seduce me or rape me?" He said, "I'm a gentleman." And she said, "So rape then." Which is like a hilarious, I think it's a great moment, like joke in the movie, and it's really quippy the way that it's written and performed. But it's like, that's the world that she lives in. And so to an extent, I could see why someone who's been completely thrown to the fringes of it, and it's not like it's like, oh, this is happening in some backwater. Like, when she gets the birch in the opening scene, or early on in the first act, she's going to be beaten with a stick, and the soldier brings her into the kitchen. The headmistress doesn't try to protect her and doesn't even try to like stop it. She just said, like, she assumes she's about to be raped, and she's like, "Oh, you can do that in the barn." Like, that's the kind of society they live in. I think if she were to be like, I could kind of give a fuck if this empire falls 10 years from now, I could see where that empathy comes, or that mindset comes from.
So I get your point, and I think it made me think about something you said earlier, and I think this film is kind of absurd, and it is kind of the society they live in, right? Because even when they venture outside of town, you see how absurd and over the top like this period of time is being painted, right? With like when they're in the brothel, Emma Stone's character is like a representation of that, I guess, right? She came up through that, and now she's
Yes.
climbing the ladder in the royal realm, you know. But is she just, if the question is she justified to like do whatever she wants because she like made it there? I don't know. I think morally no, but like props to her for doing it. Like she climbed that next ladder, you know, she got it up out of nothing and she moved up.
What's funny? Sorry, I'm just gonna say really quick. I kind of like had this whole thought in my head of like, like she's a victim, maybe she should, maybe it is kind of justified, and you just being like, yeah, like I get it, but like I don't think you can just do whatever you want. I'm like, yeah, no, that actually is kind of the way. I think John changed my mind, so that's all it took for me.
Oh, that's funny. Well, it was a good conversation about that. Wait, okay, so wow, that just took a lot of time. No, that was a good conversation. All right, where do we go from here? So I want to talk about a couple more things I thought were good. Then I want to ask you about a couple of things that maybe were bad, and then let's close out and say how we feel. But anything else before I move on to that, or anything else that was on your mind?
I just want to say, because you kind of piqued my interest about it.
Sure.
So one, I was not a big fan of Poor Things. I had a lot of issues with it personally. I thought I had some great production design, great costuming, but I had problems with it. One of my biggest problems with it was the brothel sequence towards the end where Emma Stone becomes a prostitute, and it's this like woman-owned, woman-run brothel in Paris in that movie.
Yeah.
And I just felt like it was kind of like, I understood it was fantastical. I'm not trying to be like some Puritan about things. Like I love Denora. I love depictions of like a world we don't get to see a lot, which is like sex work, right? Like it's like a very anyway, I don't need to belabor this any further. I just found it pretty offensive, honestly, that they made it out to be this like, hey, it's actually a great place for a woman to like make a living back in the 1700s or 1800s, when like they all would have been getting sick from like syphilis or like all these different types of things, and being abused and being exploited when their owner takes all the money. Like I just found it really kind of despicable that like women throughout history have been abused systematically in this way, and this is supposed to be a scene of empowerment. Like I don't know. I found that kind of offensive personally.
Well, I found it offensive too, but it's honestly just because it's like I could never watch this movie with my parents. You know, like it's just too much, like way too much. Like I don't want to go to the theater and see that much like graphic stuff. You know, the themes I agree with your point, but also like I was offended kind of for a different reason. I'm like, this is a lot. Like there's like this guy's face, he's burping. Like it's just like what are we doing here?
Yeah, well, I don't even have a problem with like the nudity, sexuality element of it. I just really took issue with like, if you're going to try to seriously talk about like men are gross, we should have empowerment of women, which I think is important, then like I think it's kind of gross to like put your rose-colored glasses on about one of the worst places for women in history. And so it made me think like, maybe Yorgos doesn't know how brutal these places are, but then in this movie there's a brothel, and it actually is brutal. Like she wakes up and she's told like, you can't leave until you've paid off your debt, even though we sold your horse, which is obviously more expensive than any of the medical procedures we've done. So it was just interesting for me that Yorgos has different movies with brothels. One of them so much more real than the other.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying the one in this movie isn't glorifying it as much.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying. I actually do understand that. I think I was just mainly like, a reason I like this better than Poor Things is I think because like it's just done a little more tastefully, that kind of stuff. And I don't like the themes as Poor Things. I like the themes here a lot better, and it's more interesting. The trial is more interesting. But the thing I think I focus on more Poor Things, I'm like, that was just too much, like too much graphic for me. I'm good on. I don't need all that. But I agree with your point. I just hadn't thought about it like that before.
John wants to watch a PG-13 movie unless it's Brian De Palma, and then he'll more than happily see some woman's bush in the 70s.
See, that's the thing.
Okay.
But that's what I want to explain.
Modern bush, no way for John McKissick.
No, but that's what I want to explain. Yeah, I don't really like. That's the part of the De Palma movies I don't want to see. Like, that's not the kind of movie I'm watching. You know, like I didn't know. Like I fired the movie up. I have no idea what it's going to be, and then there's a shot like that. I'm like, oh my god, what? Like it's like when you're talking about.
Like, John's Dressed to Kill. This movie's disgusting. 5 out of 5 masterpiece.
No, yeah. Actually, no, I didn't think it was a 4.5. No, the thing is, I was about to say, like, with something like Body Double, like, it's false advertising. You press on the cover, then all of a sudden, it's a bunch of nudity. But then I realized, like, the cover of the movie, like, is just like a girl, like, naked. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I knew what I was getting into with that one.
Yeah.
No, but like that, I get uncomfortable with that kind of stuff in movies. I don't want to see that in a movie. So Poor Things was way too much, is my point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any other highlights you wanted to touch on before we start touching on some issues?
Yes, just a couple. So I liked the like kind of a Kubrick homage. So it's like he did with Barry Lyndon with the title cards and the chapters. Like there's all like the natural lighting stuff, trying to look like paintings. There's like a kind of like a harpsichord score, but it feels a little like more dark, like Poor Things, where there's all these weird little sounds going around. So I just thought it was cool. Like I liked that he was doing this homage. But then I actually read, and I was going to bring this up at the end, where someone asked Yorgos in a Q&A, like, oh, were you like heavily inspired by Barry Lyndon? He was like, oh, I was trying to make like a movie with as little Barry Lyndon as possible. And I think what that probably means is like do his own take on it, because there is like so much in it, because and like other people were saying that too, that they don't necessarily agree that he achieved that goal of to do like only a little Barry Lyndon. I'll be curious what you think about it when you see it too, because like yeah, I think it's a pretty much a direct homage, but I still, it made me respect like what he was doing. So yeah, I want to bring that up. And then another thing is it just, I like it. I think it does a good job capturing the tone of the era, like all the weird stuff. You brought this up earlier, but like, how about that scene where they're just throwing oranges at the naked guy, you know?
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's never explained. That's the best part about it, is they're never trying to be like, hey, and by the way, like this guy screwed up or he's the new one. It's like, this is just what we do here. You know, this is like what civility and civilization is like.
Well, and then imagine like the conversation to get it going, like, all right, whose turn is it? You know?
No, but like he's liking it. That's the other best part. He loves it. He's having a good time up there, that little perv.
Oh yeah, he loves it. But yeah, and it's also just like absurd. Like there's the duck races, and like it's supposed to be
the duck races. Any scene that had a duck for me was a masterpiece. I loved seeing them cheer on the duck. I love there's a scene where Nicholas Hoult is sitting next to the guy who owns the best duck, and it just looks like, and the guy's just like kind of like really, honestly, give that guy an Oscar. Yeah. He seems like he loves this duck. He's so sincere, but it just looks like he's jerking off because he's holding this duck in his lap.
Yeah.
I love how like he's like, you could like get the fucking duck out of here, and he's like, listen, this is the fastest duck in all of England. Yeah. Someone would steal this duck. I do not leave the duck.
No, he's serious. And then I was gonna ask you one more question. This episode's all over the place. I apologize. Okay. Our viewers who are still here, listen. Our viewer who suggested this, maybe who's still here, I'm sorry, this is all over the place, but I think we're having to go talk about it. So all the different lenses is very interesting, but is it good? Like it's a little, for me it's a lot. Like it's like every shot it's like a different switched lens, and like you're just watching the camera move so much, and then the fisheye, and I'm like, whoa, this is like a bit too much. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I actually thought at first I had some issue with the fisheye lens, and I think that's probably because I have a little bit of Yorgos prejudice, like I mentioned before, and I was like, oh shit, here we fucking go. But you know, then there was actually times where I thought it was really cool. Like there was a shot of it, or they used fisheye lens a couple times when they would be pushing Olivia Colman, the Queen, in her wheelchair down the hall. And I actually thought it was a really cool use of it. Like you really did feel like you understood the space around you. And they did it one other time when they're outside in, I think it's when they're shooting the ducks at first. And so I thought those were both actually really cool usages. But yeah, there were other times where it takes me out of it ultimately. Like I appreciate that he's trying to like show us visually like a different style that we're not as used to before. And I think that's, you know, give him props for it. But to be honest, for me, one of the things I'm looking for in any movie is immersion. And I just consistently felt like it was taking me out of it when those shots happened. So it wasn't enough that I give it like, you know, -2 or something, but as silly as that sounds, but it did. Yeah, I would have preferred a little bit less of it.
Yeah. And I think that leads right into our conversation about like what maybe we didn't like so much about it. And we're trying to make our case of underrated, overrated, properly rated. And I think the camera work for me, it's like if I'm constantly thinking about the camera work, I think I heard someone say this once, so I'm just repeating things, but aren't we all? But like it's that's not like you want to be. You don't want to be constantly thinking about how the camera is moving. And I think it was hard because there was really cool shots, like really cool spaces that he was filming this in. But then I'm just constantly thinking about all these different choices he's making, and it's like it's really cool. I do appreciate it, but it's like what about the story? You know, I was kind of like kept checking out of the story.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison here, but you know, I did appreciate. I feel like he did enough of the changes, especially the fisheye, or maybe that's just the
Yeah.
most obvious one. That there is part of your brain that starts to be like, okay, like maybe this is just the way this story is being told, and so part of you can, even if you obviously do notice a change in lens style, you're starting to be like, well, this is just how this movie goes. I don't know if I fully got there, but I think a version of it where I do would be like a Wes Anderson. Like he is doing a lot of unique sort of like rail shots or tracking shots, and like we're going in and out of
Yep.
rooms. And so in that way, I think that's like the version I would point to of like, yes, you can totally notice the cinematography and what's going on in a conscious sense, but it feels so cohesive that it's not distracting. It gets to that point where it's that level of consistency. So yeah, that's just my take on
No,
it.
that makes sense. So what do you think about it? When we get into the closing thoughts, ranking, how do you feel
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah, I mean, so I think at least in terms of the letterbox 4, for me it's a little overrated, maybe I would say, because I just did have some issues with like the shots we mentioned a second ago. I felt like it was maybe a little longer than it needed to be too, at 2 hours. I mean, that's just maybe a little nitpicky, but at the same time, I did enjoy it more than I expected. This is definitely one of my preferred Yorgos Lanthimos movies. It might be my favorite of his movies, actually, of the 4 that I've seen. So, I mean, personally, I would give it, for what it's worth, a 3.5 out of 5. So, like, I still definitely enjoyed it, and I definitely respected what he was able to do. I think my favorite part of the movie is I guess it's a combination of, I really do like the performances. I think
Yeah.
all 3 of the leads, as well as the supporting actors, are really, really excellent. And I do actually really like the script. Like, I think it portrays them for however flawed or strong or weak these women are. I feel like they are like fully fleshed out people to me. Like, I believe that there's depth to them. And when they leave the scene, like I think that they are up to things. So I think it does a lot successfully here. And I think it is a good movie.
But at the end, how did you feel at the end? Because I think we're on the same part about the score, and I think it's pretty much properly rated, if not a little overrated. I think I give it a 3.5 as well, so I think maybe a 4 is a little high. But like at the end, did you think like were you going like what'd you feel about it? You know, like it didn't end and all of a sudden I like realized something. It was just kind of like, oh, all right.
Yeah, I feel like the ending is obviously important. It's what sticks with you the most,
Yeah.
typically. I feel like the shot of the overlay of the rabbits when that was going on felt a little ham-fisted, to be honest. Like, I don't know if it needed to be that long,
Yeah.
but I do think it was, overall, the ending is really good, because that is the kind of the ultimate twist of the knife, where Emma Stone finally realizes and kind of submits, like, oh fuck, I haven't really changed my situation. I'm ultimately still just like being completely exploited. Um, so I will say, I think that, there's movies that I see in theater that I'm like, oh, that was enjoyable and entertaining. I actually think that was a pretty good movie. And then time goes on and I actually think about it more and more. I'm like, kind of fuck that movie a little bit.
Yeah.
I kind of feel the opposite about this one. Like, I think that over time I might come to appreciate it more, just because, again, those 3 lead characters are actually really interesting in their own ways. Like, I actually maybe wish we got a little bit more out of Rachel Weisz in terms of the depth. Like, and part of it is she's just such an honest person. It doesn't feel like we get to see a lot of different sides of her, because she's so consistently one dimension, or one face. So I think I'll like it more over time.
No, I mean, I
Even
liked it.
more, I should say.
Yeah, sure. And I actually think that this conversation made me like it a little bit more, because one of the questions I've highlighted is like, is this a good chess match between the 3 of them? Because Barry Lyndon has a little bit of like a rise and fall, and I like that more, kind of like a rise and fall story, like Goodfellas or whatever. But then the kind of chess match, there's a Scorsese movie called Age of Innocence, which is like the same time period and like more of like a triangle, you know. And I was like, is this a good movie of that? And I think it is. And I think from us discussing it and thinking like who won, who is the, it's like that that made me think about it a little bit more. But like when it ended, I kind of landed like, oh, okay, like that was pretty cool. I really liked the style. I liked the camera shots he's going for. I liked that he was inspired by Barry Lyndon or Kubrick, and just trying out these different lenses. And it's like a solid 3.5. And I think if Barry Lyndon and Age of Innocence are like 4.5s to me, because Barry Lyndon maybe has superior like cinematography and Age of Innocence maybe has a superior like story. This is like a good combination of both those things. Like this is a great movie that I would recommend for someone, interested in this kind of time period movie or some cool camera stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at on it.
Yeah, I think I almost would even, I mean, this is kind of a, bear with me for the analogy, but I almost think it's more of a poker game than it is a chess game.
Sure.
In that it's all three of these women are sitting at the table. Maybe we'll even kind of count Nicholas Holt as a fourth, but like they're playing their hands, especially Sarah and Abigail, and they're bluffing constantly and they're bullying people with their chip count. And at a certain point it feels like Emma Stone has won, and certainly she feels like she's won. But then, like the cards turn over and you really do see that Olivia Colman has just had the trump cards the whole time. Like it never really was a game in the same way. Or maybe they're all playing a different game, as Rachel Weisz puts it. But I really enjoyed it. I think that I will have a growing appreciation for the characters, and I would ultimately rewatch it at some point. I think that like there would be something meaningful to be gained of like now knowing these characters a little bit better going into it. Like, was Emma Stone always so greedy as she was at the end, or is that just something that kind of comes with the vindication of like her victory? It's a little unclear.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure there'd be so many cool things to notice. Like I feel like if you want to rewatch a movie, you have to like enjoy watching it. And I enjoyed watching it and looking in the background and looking at the different shots. And like there's some good laughs in it, like it's definitely like rewatchable in that way. I think I'm just so obsessed with scoring, man. I don't know. This whole podcast must be me trying to figure out my scoring thing. And I just have to look at it against the other movies I've seen that like stack up on a different tier, and I have to say where it's at. But like by no means what I said 3.5 is a bad rating. Like that's a great rating for a lot of movies. It's just like when I'm looking at it against some of these other period pieces and that I've seen, at least I haven't seen them all. I'm like, this is where it's at. And that's the opinion I'm trying to share.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Totally agree.
All right, man. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
I guess I'll just say one last time. I really did like this movie. And like that's such a lukewarm take, but I'm just saying from the point of view of someone that hasn't really liked other Yorgos. Like I think Killing of a Sacred Deer, I couldn't get over the dialogue. Poor Things, I had issues with kind of the story of it in addition to the dialogue. Kinds of Kindness came out last year, and you didn't see that, did you?
No, I didn't.
It's kind of like 3 mini movies essentially, but I actually really enjoyed that. And it had some wonky dialogue to it, but I thought it was overall unique. You should check it out. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I should. That has Jesse Plemons in it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting. All the characters play different characters, or all the actors play different characters in each of the stories. Each
cool.
of the 3 movies.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
But anywho, yeah, I mean, I was really pleasantly surprised by this one, so I would recommend to somebody.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it made me respect him more as a director. I've only seen 2 of his movies. I definitely want to see more of his movies because he's a unique voice, I think we had a good conversation about it. I think it made me like it a little bit more in some of the things we talked about because there was a lot of questions that I ended with. But yeah, glad we did it. All right, man.
Agreed. Do we know what we are planning to watch next?
I don't think we do. I think we're gonna have to come back on that.
Okay. All right. Well, we do have some other or plenty of other movies that we've discussed in the past, so you can click on some links in a second here to get routed to those. But if there's anything else that anyone wants us to watch, feel free to leave a comment letting us know what you thought about this movie or other movies that we should watch, and we will get back to you.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Good catching up, John.
Yeah. Thanks, man.